The problem is that enough was never a destination. You built a strategy around arriving somewhere that doesn't exist. You know that moment when the day finally quiets down and instead of relaxing, your brain gets louder? The questions start showing up. Why am I so tired? Why does my anxiety feel different than it used to? Why does my life look fine but feel off? You don't have time to think about it during the day, so it waits for you at night. This is What the Shift, the podcast for those 2 a.m. thoughts you keep trying to ignore. The ones about exhaustion, people-pleasing, overfunctioning, boundaries, changing bodies, shifting identities, and the quiet realization that nothing is wrong. It just can't keep going the same way. I'm Gia Lacqua, and if it's been keeping you up at 2 a.m., it's trying to tell you something. Welcome to What the Shift. Hey, shifters, welcome back to What the Shift. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. I want you to grab whatever you are drinking right now because we're going to get into something real today. So, in the work that I do, I help leaders to design their personal strategy. And a lot of people ask me, what is a personal strategy? How do I know what my strategy is? And more importantly, how do I know if the strategy that I'm running is something that I intentionally designed or if it's something that I inherited? And I know how that sounds because your first instinct is probably to push back. That's what mine would be, right? To say, like, I'm a grown adult. I've made thousands of decisions. I built my career. I built my life, my relationships. Nobody handed me a script. And you're right. Nobody handed you a script. And that is what makes this so hard to see. Because it wasn't a handoff. It's more of an installation. It starts early on. It happens very quietly and so gradually that by the time you're old enough to even question it, it sort of just feels like part of who you are, like your personality or your instinct. And a lot of us chalk it up to personality traits or quirks, or this is just how I am. This is just how I'm wired. And that is exactly how inherited strategy works, which is why I believe this work is so important because it doesn't feel like a strategy. It just feels like your reality. So today, I want to really open up the hood and look underneath to help crystallize this, to help make it abundantly clear to the people who are curious to really understand this and to learn more. So I want to start by saying that I look at this in terms of 5 domains that we all have where inherited strategy is quietly running the show, whether or not we realize it. And so as we go through each domain, I want you to think about how this might show up or not for you, right? It may show up in some, it may not show up in others, it may show up in little bits throughout. So just think about how this shows up for you. So the 5 domains are work or career, relationships, self-worth, time and energy, and how you make decisions. So we're going to walk through all 5 with specific evidence that I want you to look at and think about maybe for the first time, maybe not. But by the end of this episode, you'll either feel deeply seen or mildly furious because honestly, both are valid because it means that it's landing. So let's get into it. Domain 1 is work or career. So the inherited strategy here is my value equals what I produce, equals my output, my productivity. And this one is sneaky because we call it ambition. It looks like drive. It looks like hunger. It looks like the kind of work ethic that gets you promoted. It gets you praised. And you get the quote unquote rising star award or, the newsletter section. And for a while, and maybe for a long time, it works. And so what do? We keep doing it, right? If something is working, we're going to keep doing it. Sometimes we double down. But here's the thing, you don't say yes because you want to. You're saying yes before you've even thought about whether or not you want to. So the request lands and your mouth is already forming the word sure, no problem, I've got it, while your nervous system is quietly screaming. You take on more because you can, not because it's the right decision, but because capability has become its own justification. You're the fixer. You're the reliable one. You're the person that everyone knows will catch it before it falls. You're the one that everyone knows is going to get it done. And listen, that identity feels good. I get it. That was me. But let's be honest about that for a minute. It feels really good to be the person in the room that everyone relies on, that everyone depends on, until it doesn't. Because here's the brutal irony of becoming indispensable. You also become completely replaceable. When your entire identity is what you produce, you're only one bad quarter or one restructure, one new manager away from a full-blown identity crisis. And your body will eventually present the bill in the form of burnout, chronic exhaustion, health issues, or just a general sensation of being hollow that no vacation actually fixes. So here's the thing, busy isn't a strategy, busy is a symptom. And if you've been mistaking one for the other, it's not a character flaw, it's an inherited blueprint doing exactly what it was designed to do. The second domain we're going to talk about, relationships. The inherited strategy here is keep the peace, be liked, don't rock the boat, don't be too much. Oh, this one. This one runs deep for me, for so many women. So what do? We over accommodate. We overextend. We anticipate what other people need before they've even spoken it. Sometimes before they've even thought it. Because you have become a highly sophisticated, emotional early warning system that is fine-tuned to prevent conflict and maintain harmony. And honestly, it's quite an impressive skill. But it is also an exhausting, full-time job that nobody hired you for. And by the way, nobody is paying you to do this. And what does that look like? In the long term, what I see is we avoid the hard conversations. Not because we don't know what we want to say or what needs to be said. You know exactly what needs to be said. You've even thought about it in your head. It's just that when the time comes, you tell yourself, now's not the right time. Or, the other person might be stressed out. Or maybe, it'll resolve on its own. And this is the one I really want you to sit with. Sometimes you're not even sure that you're allowed to need what you need. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes you're not even sure that you're allowed to need what you need. That's how deep this runs. The cost of this strategy is devastating in a really quiet way because you're deeply needed again by almost everyone in your life. And at the same time, you're rarely fully known by any of them because you've been so busy managing how you're perceived, softening your edges, making yourself palatable, that the actual, full, unfiltered version of you hasn't had a lot of airtime. And sit with that for a minute because there's layers to this one. You have a lot of different relationships. How many people on the other side of that relationship have actually met the true you? Domain 3 is self-worth. So the inherited strategy here is I'll feel enough when. This is a big one. When I hit the goal, when I lose the weight, when I get the promotion, the house, the recognition, the version of my life that finally looks the way I said it would look by now. When no one can criticize me because I've made myself criticism proof through sheer excellence. So you hit the goal, and it feels good for approximately 3 minutes. And then you raise the bar. You're on to the next thing because that's what your strategy requires. But let me tell you what's actually happening underneath that. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is the belief that when you reach the thing that you are striving for, the goal, the title, the number, the version of your life that finally looks quote unquote right, you will feel the way you've been waiting to feel: peace, relief, settled, enough, done. And then what we discovered is that arrival doesn't actually deliver on the promise. And the emotional payoff that we're anticipating almost never matches what we actually feel when we get there. Because the brain, brilliant, relentless, ungrateful organ that it is, immediately recalibrates. It finds the next horizon and it moves the line. It moves the finish line. So the strategy is built on arrival, and your arrival or your finish line keeps moving. So what do? We keep running, but we're not running towards something. Sometimes we're running away from the feeling of not enough. And I can tell you firsthand that that is an exhausting race to run. The perfectionism isn't really about the work itself. And it's not about the presentation of being flawless or the project being solid. The perfectionism is really armor designed to protect us. It's a very sophisticated way of trying to control what people think of you, which is, to be clear, a thing that's not actually controllable, no matter how good the presentation is. And I know, I get it. Deeply unfair. I didn't make the rules. But you've been chasing enough for a long time. And I really want to gently suggest that the problem is not that you haven't reached it yet. The problem is that enough was never a destination. You built a strategy around arriving somewhere that doesn't exist. And you are so tired from the ride. Domain 4, time and energy. The inherited strategy here: busyness equals importance. Exhausted equals successful, right? This is really tied to our hustle culture. You fill every gap, not because you plan to, because gaps feel dangerous. The empty space in your calendar triggers something that feels a lot like guilt, right? The empty space in the room when no one is talking, you feel like you got to fill it. Or laziness. Think about the sneaking suspicion that if you slow down, if you rest, if you pause, something or everything is going to fall apart. Or someone will notice that you've slowed down and conclude that you're not as serious as they thought. Rest for you is earned, not allowed, earned. After enough output, after enough productivity, after enough doing, and then maybe you're permitted to stop. Except that enough threshold keeps shifting too, right? That finish line. So rest keeps getting pushed off as well. And here's what this costs you. And I want you to hear this really clearly. You lose strategic capacity because when your life is running on reactive, there's no bandwidth for intentionality. You're too busy managing the urgent to ever address the important. And you're too exhausted to think clearly about whether any of this is actually moving you towards something you want. You're in the game so deep that you've lost the ability to see the board. And this isn't about doing less. It's about the fact that exhaustion is not a credential. It never was. But somewhere along the way, someone told us that suffering proved commitment. And we just believed it. We bought into this concept. We made it part of our culture. We've normalized it. And now you're running a performance. Domain 5, decision making. And this is the one, inherited strategy. What's the right move? What's the right move? And let me check with literally everyone before I decide. You crowdsource your choices. You ask 5 people the same question. You absorb 5 different answers. And then you feel more confused than when you started. And then you either delay the decision or make it based on a consensus that really didn't factor you into the equation. And here's the part that's genuinely maddening. You call it getting input. You call it being thoughtful. You call it doing your due diligence. And sometimes it is those things. But sometimes, and you know which times I mean, it's validation. It's that external validation that's disguised as advice. And you're not actually asking because you don't know. You're asking because you know and you're scared to trust it. Nobody taught you how to trust yourself. And so you want someone else to say the thing that you already believe so you can proceed without being fully responsible for the outcome. And I know this firsthand. I lived it. I knew the answers to my questions, but so often I would rely on someone external, someone besides me that I respected to give me the same or a similar answer so I could validate it. I could say, well, it wasn't just me that believed this, right? Somebody else believed this too. And so we hesitate even when we know and we second guess. So we outsource the call to somebody who is not the expert, somebody with less context, with less skin in the game, with less understanding with what you actually want. And then we wonder why the decision doesn't feel like ours. And then nothing feels fully aligned because nothing is fully aligned because it wasn't fully yours. And the cost here isn't just time. Let's be clear, it's power. So every time you hand your decision to someone else, you practice not trusting yourself. And the more you practice it, the more convinced you become that you need external authority to navigate your own life. I wrote a whole book about this topic, and it's called Power Shift. It's the strategic framework for what comes next. It's what it looks like to actually design your life instead of defaulting into it. And if you'd like to learn more, you can grab it wherever books are sold. So those are the 5 domains. Those are the 5 inherited strategies at a high level. Of course, we go much deeper in the work that I do, but there's one pattern underneath all of them. And that is you've been running a strategy that you didn't write. And listen, it's not because you were naive. It's not because you're weak. It's because it was installed early on. It was reinforced constantly. And it worked for us until it didn't. Until the cost started exceeding the return. Until you started feeling like you were executing someone else's vision of your life with extraordinary confidence and wondering why it still feels like something is missing. And that feeling is not ingratitude. It's not anxiety. It's not a sign that you need to work harder or want less or just be more grateful for what you have. It's a signal. It's your actual strategy trying to get your attention. You didn't choose the strategy you've been running, but you can choose the next one. And that is the shift. That's always been the shift. I want to thank you for tuning in today. And if this landed with you, share it with a friend who's having the same thoughts at 2 a.m. And if you want more conversations like this, stick around because this is where we make shift happen. Take care. All right, shifters, before you jump back into your day or back into your thoughts, if something from this conversation stuck with you, that's not random. A shift doesn't happen because you push harder. It happens when you stop ignoring the thing that keeps coming back. So here's your only ask. If this episode made you think of someone, send it to them. That's how these conversations are spread. Quietly, honestly, person to person. This is What the Shift.